Welcome, everyone. Might as well start her off. My name is Deb Hodgson, for those of you who are not familiar with me, and for those who are, please bear with my story. Thank you for joining us today. I'm co-founder of New Hampshire for Safe Technology, along with Jen White and Lori Schreier, and my unplanned journey over the past 6 years is what's led me here today. In the fall of 2017, we had scheduled to have our home measured for RF on our return from a hiking trip out west. I had planned to come off blood thinners as I was aware that wireless could thicken the blood, so I thought that was a prudent precaution to take. I had also been having issues with insomnia, ringing in the ears, heart arrhythmia, palpitations, tooth and jaw pain, dry eye, facial flushing, dizziness, and blood pressure issues. I had developed severe pressure headaches that felt like my brain was swollen or on fire. I had great difficulty thinking, speaking, and remembering. I even got lost several times in the town I've lived in for nearly 40 years. I did not yet know that was all related until we removed the wireless from our home and cars. My health quickly improved. My seemingly unrelated symptoms disappeared as well. Interestingly, the plant in my kitchen that had sat there doing nothing for over a year suddenly grew 15 inches in just 2 months. That was an eye-opener to everyone in the family. It's much easier to believe what you can actually see. Realizing this is an issue that ultimately affects everyone, I stepped out of my comfort zone, way out, with a little push from reading EMF Off and the support of Cece, despite knowing others will certainly think I must be crazy. I held 2 public screenings of Generation Sept and reached out to many, including legislators. My state rep, Patrick O'Brien, was truly exceptional. He actually listened and responded. He investigated the science and was successful in getting New Hampshire to pass the first US law to begin addressing technology safety. The New Hampshire Commission on Health and Environmental Effects of Wireless Technology was established in the fall of 2019 and produced a groundbreaking report in the fall of 2020. The New Hampshire Commission report is a great place to become informed, to empower you to protect yourself, your family, and community by becoming aware and learning how to use technology safely. We at New Hampshire for Safe Technology, along with Cece Doucette of Mass for Safe Technology, are supporting the Commission's work through community information sessions like this, and we thank you all for being here. Next up is our wonderful speaker and friend, Cece Doucette. She's been a tireless supporter to us in New Hampshire and the rest of the country, and we are very grateful to her. Welcome, Cece.
Let me unmute myself.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Deb. And I am just so honored to be here once again to help co-host this program with you, and for all the work that you and your colleagues in New Hampshire have done. You know, they say this work is a marathon and not a sprint, and that is certainly true. But I'd like to share a little bit about how I got involved in this issue as well. And so what I'm going to do is pull up a screen share. And Sydney, can you give me a nod when you can see that? Okay, great, thanks. So this is a set of slides I've prepared to help people quickly connect the dots on what this wireless radiation issue is. So I've called it Wireless Technology Risks and Safer Solutions, because for everything we've messed up, there are definitely solutions for fixing it. So when we're through with our presentation today, it'll take a day or two to render the video and get that together with my slides, but we'll send it out for everybody so that as we go through these slides, you know, there may very well likely be things you're going to want to do a deeper dive into. So feel free, anything that has the blue underline in my slides, you'll recognize as a link, and you can go right to the sources. So for the 10 years that I've been investigating this, I hope this will save folks some time to quickly come up to speed and know what the problem is and what we can do to fix it. So this MTPW after my name means I had the privilege of earning a master's in technical and professional writing from Northeastern University, where I also earned my undergraduate in communication studies. And never in a million years did I imagine that this is where that skill set would lead me today. But I'm grateful to be able to help with the education component of this wireless radiation issue. So when my kids were in school, I used to run the local education foundation, and that was at the time when the industry was pushing in this 21st century classroom. And one night at book group, a girlfriend of mine who was an electrical engineer tipped us off that there could be something wrong biologically with all of the wireless radiation exposures that we have today. And it was book group, so I just made a mental note of it. And then not long after that, something crossed my desk again, inferring that wireless is not safe. So being a tech writer, I just thought, wow, I wonder if there's any science to this. And so I went out and I started looking, and I was astounded to find literally thousands of peer-reviewed published studies showing great biological harm. And we're going to step you through the long-term and the short-term exposures in a few minutes. So having brought this into my kids' schools, I raised my hand in our schools and said, hey, folks, I think we might have a problem here. And I expected that they would respond as if we had a gas leak in the science lab, and that we would get the kids and the teachers out of the building until we fix it and then bring them back in and continue safe education. Well, that's not at all what happened. I got back crickets. And then once I did get their attention, it was news to everybody. Our IT director said, wow, I've never heard of health effects. Let me go check. And he came back and he said, oh, the FCC says it's fine. Well, as we'll show you in a little bit here, there are reasons why the FCC has not brought the public radiation exposure limits in line with the science. So long story short, not an easy conversation to have with my schools, but to their credit, when they looked into this, they came up with this little sign over here called best practices for mobile devices, and turn off our devices when we're not using them. Only turn the Wi-Fi on, like the access points and the routers. Only turn it on when it's not, when it's needed. Otherwise, we leave this pulsating microwave radiation 24/7. And as we'll see in a moment, always place the mobile device on a solid surface other than your body. So we became the first in the United States to even have this little sign hanging in our classrooms. That was back in 2014. And our schools today are still waiting for higher authorities to tell them what to do. So I went to my state representative, Tom Sanacandro at the time, and my state senator, who is now our Senate president, Karen Spilka. And I met with Karen and I showed her the science. I showed her our little sign. I measured the radiation coming off of her cell phone and her district director's laptop. Both devices went way into the red zone, and they're looking at me like, really? I said, yes, and nobody knows. Is there something from where you sit that we could simply give the public the facts and the right to know? Because once we know better, we can do better. So she put me with an attorney in her office. Together, we crafted a very simple bill that would form a commission at the state level, bring the right minds together, look at this issue, and decide what to do. That was back in 2014. The bill was introduced in 2015, and we did get it out of committee. We've gotten a number of bills on the wireless issue out of committee the first time through, and then they stopped. And we've never enacted one here in Massachusetts, but we are still trying. We've got 6 bills this session that we'll show you in a little bit. And as Deb mentioned, through the incredible work in New Hampshire, they became the first in the nation to pass a law to investigate. And we're going to share with you this amazing, groundbreaking report that their legislators have published. So on this journey, I was contacted by somebody in the UK, this couple that realized we can't fix this problem until we can educate people intelligently on this. So I was very grateful to partner with Lynn and Brett West in the UK. And then Dr. Deborah Davis, who's a Nobel Peace Prize co-laureate on climate change, she has figured out this issue and founded the Environmental Health Trust. Well, Brett and Lynn had contacted Dr. Davis and said, could we please reference your website, the Environmental Health Trust, in these online courses that we're building? And she said, yes, and you might want to speak to this woman, Cece Doucette, because she's made inroads with her schools and with her legislators. And because I'm a tech writer, I volunteered my skill set to help with this course. And Dr. Davis introduced us to one of the world's leading scientists out of Finland, Dr. Mikko Ahonen. And for months, Brett, Mikko, Lynn, and I hit it hard, and we came up with a schools and families course that can be completed online in about a half an hour. We can literally train your entire school district, your town, your workforce in about a half an hour online. So please know that this off-the-shelf resource is already available, and we charge a nominal fee. I think right now it's $15, but we'll certainly do bulk discounts for schools. We'll even do sliding scale. We just want to create a win-win where the school is educated, the children are protected, and the community members who are good, social, responsible partners can also protect the employees that they have in their companies. So lots of great resources here. And then when we were at the State House testifying and getting ready to testify on some of these bills way back in 2015, 2016, I was so humbled to walk into a room at the State House, full, standing room only, of people who understood this wireless radiation issue. Because for the first 2 years that I got involved, I was the only person I could speak to about this. And honestly, I wasn't even sure what I was saying, but I was reading the science and I knew this was adding up to something very bad for public health. So ultimately, a bunch of us connected, and we have now founded Massachusetts for Safe Technology. And if you go out to this website, you will find the science on our resources page. You will find our state efforts page that chronicles what we've been doing in Massachusetts. You'll also find the New Hampshire report. You'll see that the Massachusetts Medical Society, through the work that Dr. Lisa Naj and I did, they have recognized that we need to be addressing EMS. You will see that there is a first in the nation emergency order by the town of Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and their Board of Health, asking Verizon to move a cell tower that caused 17 children and adults to become so ill that they've had to abandon their homes. So we've got a lot of really, really powerful information at this website and instructions and guidance for you to protect yourself and then help to protect your community. I like to include this link for the Health and Buildings Roundtable Conference that was held down at the National Institutes of Health. I was asked to co-chair the technology panel, and we were speaking to hospitals, to doctors, to federal agencies, to urban planners, to architects, all these people who care about what happens inside the built environment as far as environmental toxins are concerned. So for the first time, we got to present information on wireless radiation risks. And I was just so grateful that we had leading experts join us. We had the retired president of Microsoft Canada, Frank Clegg, who after he retired said, well, what do we really know about the wireless end of it? And he sought out a dozen of the world's leading experts and came back and said, you know what? Here in North America, Canada's Safety Code 6, the United States Federal Communications Commission's guidelines, they don't protect us for biological effects. They only acknowledge heat effects. So for example, how much heat would you get from putting a cell phone up to your head or onto your body, you know, tucked in your bra or your suit pocket or your shirt or in your yoga waistband or your back pocket? How much heat would it take to raise the temperature of gel inside of a 90th percentile of fitness military mannequin? How much heat would it take to raise the gel temperature? That's the only testing that they've done. And they haven't updated those standards since 1996. And we have just exploded with wireless technology since then. So We had Frank Clegg from Microsoft Canada telling us that we are not safe. We had Dr. Martin Pall, Pall, who's one of the world's leading scientists on this, showing us the mechanisms of harm that happen biologically when we expose ourselves to microwaves. And then we had Theodora Sforato, who's the executive director at Dr. Deborah Davis's Environmental Health Trust. And she came to share with us what other countries are already doing. Like there are schools removing the wireless because nobody should be radiating our children. And then we had Peter Sullivan, and I found Peter Sullivan's work through a lecture that he gave online. Peter used to be a fighter pilot, kind of like Top Gun. And so he was up there inside the planes in the Earth's high electromagnetic fields of radiation. And then on his plane, he had all this radar mounted, and inside the plane, he had all this instrumentation paneling that was also pulsating man-made electric and magnetic waves. So Peter's health started to crash. And he lost a lot of weight. His teeth started getting really brittle. And when his little boys came in through the preschool years, both of his sons were diagnosed on the autism spectrum. So Peter did what a lot of parents will do. They'll look at the diet and remove all the chemical foods and go to a clean organic diet. He went so far as to do the heavy metal detox to get all the heavy metals out of the brain and the body. And then he said, today, the first line of defense I recommend is to do a digital detox. That means removing the wireless radiation from your home and at the minimum, create a sleep sanctuary where for 12 hours a night, there's no radiation in your home. And he went on to say that both of his sons are no longer on the autism spectrum. And I just went, whoa, I didn't even know that was an option. But apparently there's something called de novo mutations, which didn't come from mom's bloodline, didn't come from dad's germline. It came from somewhere in the environment. So when we remove these environmental exposures, many people see great gains in their health. And we don't want to overpromise. We know that these are complex issues. We know that every body is individually very different. But we have seen enough recovery in people that this is a really great idea to at least remove the exposures and see what happens. So the reason I include this link is because we were limited to 10 minutes each on our presentation. So if you want something highly credible, short and digestible, share this link at the National Institutes of Health. Whoops. Now, one of the things that was missing when I fell down the rabbit hole on this issue a decade ago is that we were seeing so many people getting sick and their doctors had never been trained to diagnose or to recognize even these illnesses. And so we see this referred to in a lot of different ways. EMF stands for the electromagnetic fields. These are the pulsations of microwave radiation or radio frequency radiation that come from all of our devices. So our cell phone is over here pulsating microwaves to make or maintain a handshake with the nearest cell tower or router. Always wants to keep that connection going. So we were so grateful. We had the first medical conference in 2019, and then we had an enhanced medical conference international in 2021. With the pandemic, we had to pivot to an online platform. So the video conference for 24.5 continuing medical education credits was actually available for 2 years, and it just expired this July. We're hoping that those videos will still somehow become available because these conferences take years and huge resources to plan, and I don't know of another one that's coming up on the heels of this. So we're hopeful that we will be able to have access to those recordings again because the content is still highly relevant today. So that's my journey and how I got involved in this. So how did my schools decide that they were actually going to at least hang this little sign in our classrooms? So anybody who's with us and watching, I invite anyone with an iPhone to take it out right now and go into settings, and I'll walk you through the legal fine print. Our friends at Environmental Health Trust had put up this page called See the Fine Print that shows that our devices have been telling us for years that there are biological effects here. Look at this from the iPad. It used to say seizures, blackouts, eye strain. And I know of children in neighboring towns who had their first seizures while using the iPad. So from settings in an iPhone, a little ways down, hit general, then go all the way down to the bottom on general, and you'll see legal and regulatory. Hit that. And then up at the top, you'll see a little list. About 4 down, you'll see RF exposure. That's radio frequency microwave radiation that they politely call energy, because it is man-made light energy that carries our signals and data back and forth. But in that legal fine print, it says a couple of really important things. One, this device was tested at a distance from your body. So if you're holding a radiating device, if you're putting it in your bra or your pocket or your waistband or your back pocket, you are exceeding the FCC public radiation exposure limits that were never set to protect us from biological harm. And then a couple paragraphs later, it will say, if you'd like to reduce your exposure, use a hands-free option. And I'm going to come out of the screen share just for a minute to show you, as I said, for every problem we've created, we have solutions now. So instead of putting a wired regular headset into your radiating device, you don't want to do that. You don't want to use the earbuds, because that's a microwave transmitter on both sides of your head that's now sending signal off to wherever you tucked your phone into, and you're getting walloped with radiation. Microwave radiation or radio frequency, one of the properties is that it likes metal. It amplifies with metal. So if you plug in a regular wired headset into a radiating device, that metal is going to conduct that electricity or that radio frequency right up into your brain. What you want to do is look for something called a hollow tube or an air tube headset. And let's start at the top of it. There's no metal here, no magnet to hang it around your neck, because remember, metal draws in the radiation. So just rubber tips, kind of like a doctor's stethoscope, where you get good acoustics through this hollow tube. These little ferrite beads break the radiation that's traveling up the wire below it. Then you've got the little volume and audio control muting and stuff. And then a nice long cord, so you can set your radiating device as far away from you as you can, and only turn on the one antenna that you need at the time that you need it, because they give us our devices with all Wi-Fi all the time. And we've never really thought about all these different services that they're selling us. Cellular and data, you have an antenna. Wi-Fi, you have another antenna. Bluetooth, you have another antenna. Hotspot, well, there's another antenna and a locator. And for anybody who didn't know better and already upgraded to a 5G phone, don't do it if you can get away with it. You will see that there are additional antennas in your settings for that. So we like to teach people, you get to be in control of your device instead of the other way around. So if you're not using all those antennas and you know the radiation is harmful, why would we leave them on? So I want to do a demonstration for you now. And in my home, and be gentle with yourself. It took me a while to get my head around this and realize that this microwave radiation is terribly harmful, and especially to children whose bodies are still developing, and this damages DNA, as we'll see when we look at the science. I went around my house and I figured out where all this radiation was coming from. And this is a radio frequency detection meter. It's the one that was recommended at the EMF medical conference. So doctors are buying this meter, putting it in their practice, loaning it out to their patients. There's a doctor here in Massachusetts who charges them $10, so they all absorb the cost of this, and says, you've got 2 hours. Now take it home and go do your scavenger hunt. walk all around your house, check out your car, come back and we'll teach you how to use the technology safely. So this flashing green is as good as we can get today. That's what we want to be at. Scientifically, on this meter, the unit of measurement is something called a microwatt per square meter. So like within 3 feet of air, how much radiation might we be able to have without getting sick? The science wants us to be at 10 or less of these microwatts per square meter. I know some people who are electrically sensitive can do all right with certain frequencies under 100, but the science is indicating we should be at 10 or less. Right now I'm at 2. Okay, so now I'm going to give you a demonstration with my cell phone, which I keep in airplane mode as a rule. What actually happens when these antennas start going, here I am, where are you? Here I am, where are you? Here I am, and wanting to connect. So I'm not doing anything. These antennas are just radiating, they're connecting, and okay, so we were, ooh, whoa, we were at 2 a moment ago. I'm going to go ahead and put this back into airplane mode because I really don't want to radiate myself any longer here. And then I'll tell you what it just did. Okay, so see, it's going from red. As it dissipates out the air, it goes back down into my nice, safe little levels. So we went from 2 to 1,310,000. 1,310,000 microwatts per square meter. And the science wants us to be at 10 or less, not 10,000, just 10. So that's why we're doing what we're doing today. We want to teach you guys what this is all about, and then you can walk away with the information, and what you do with that is your business. Some people are going to say, oh, we're all going to die anyway. Or you don't want to die this way. So let's go back into my screen share and we'll start to take a look at the science. But I wanted to share, you know, when we talk about solutions, when I learned about this, my brain went, what do you mean there are meters out there we can measure this with? Well, let's get one for our schools. Let's get one for our library. Let's see what's going on and how we can fix it. So we had a grant fund in my town, and I put in a grant application to get 2 of these meters, one for the schools, one for the library, so everybody can go gather their data. It sounded simple enough to my little brain. But because this issue came so far out of left field for most people, I mean, nobody even knows that fine print is there. But I'll tell you, showing people that fine print is one of the best ways I found to take this from, you open your mouth and talk about wireless harm, their brain goes tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist. When you show them in their own device, it's been telling you to be careful, then it becomes very real. Then being able to show them this actual radiation on a meter, that really lands at home. So those, you know, showing the fine print, measuring are 2 of the most effective ways to get people to really want to perhaps even tune into this conversation. So it was not an easy conversation to have with my schools. It was not an easy conversation to have with my town, but it took me 3 grant application cycles. The first 2 were denied. The first time they said, we don't really know about this. Come back next time. Second time I came back, they said, gee, this is probably more of a Board of Health issue. Well, I had checked in with our Board of Health. They didn't know about this. And then after we had our bills in Massachusetts come up for public hearing, and I testified in front of the Joint Committee on Public Health, as I'm holding up the science and our sign and my meter, I could tell that not one member of the Massachusetts legislature's Joint Committee on Public Health had any idea this issue existed. So I went and met with everybody on those committees, one by one, and none of them, save for one gentleman whose father was actually the Russian physicist who brought the team into Chernobyl after it blew. He was the only one who understood what man-made radiation could do to us. So I doubled back and thought, well, I better get in there and really educate my own town. So I met with every member of our select board and taught them this. And one of them was a retired police officer, and he said, Cece, you had me at hello. because so many of his brethren in the cruisers had the radar guns in the back. And this is where this technology came from. Wireless technology is radar, is radiation, is microwave frequencies. And those radar guns were shooting microwaves right through their brains. And a lot of the police officers got very sick and died from this. Another friend whose husband is a police officer said, yeah, and thigh cancers are another concern because the way they were configured before, those radar guns that they were holding on their laps and shooting beams out at ongoing traffic, those were giving cancers as well. So you might be pleasantly surprised when you open this conversation. A few people actually do understand, but they've never been given enough facts to make a wise, informed decision. So I doubled back. I met with every member of our select board, and then they conditionally granted me enough money to buy 1 meter for the public library for starters, on the condition that I present to the library trustees and they agree to take it into circulation. And the reason why I got the idea to put one on loan in our library is that when the energy companies started taking away the healthier incandescent light bulbs and replacing them with those swirly, squirrely CFL light bulbs that, granted, might save you some money, but what it's doing to your health is probably not worth the trade-off. But anyway, I think it was National Grid put as part of their marketing plan a little case with a kilowatt meter in it in our public libraries, so people could take it out, go home, measure their incandescent light bulbs, and then measure it against the energy consumed on one of these energy saver light bulbs and say, wow, I'm going to save a couple $100 a year. Of course, we're going to buy this new light bulb, right? Well, those light bulbs are very dangerous, not only for the mercury, but for the dirty electricity that they throw off that can make a lot of people sick. But anyway, so I met with the library trustees. There were 5 of them. One gentleman sat there with his arms crossed, and I can't remember what his background was in, but he thought this was all hogwash. Another one couldn't wait to get the radiation meter to take it home and measure her home. A third one said, regardless of how we feel personally, as a library, we are a conduit of information in the community, so let's take a vote. And they voted 4-1 to bring this acoustometer in to the public library circulation. And so this was the one back in 2016 that got placed into circulation. It's still available to Ashland residents here in Massachusetts, and only to our residents because it came out of a private fund in our town. But out in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, now they have put into their library circulation the Safe and Sound Pro 2 meter. And these are both $400 meters. Today, I would go with this one because you can plug it in into a wall socket so you don't have to run down batteries. Some people who are so sick from this radiation leave one running all the time in their home. So if somebody walks in the house and they've got something on them, a wearable or a cell phone or a tablet or some other radiating device, they will know immediately before the person gets sick. So as the technology advances, we just get better and better at it. So I met a doctor at one of the medical conferences, and she and I went after a state-funded grant for the Newton Public Library, and the Cultural Council gave us the funding to do a program to do education and to put a meter in their library. So these are just 3 here in Massachusetts. People have contacted me all over the country and said, we love that idea. We're going to do it too. Some people outright donated the device to the library. Today, most of our libraries have a library of things. Like my daughter borrowed a power washer from her library. Ours has a bicycle repair kit. They have a disc golf frisbee kit that you can borrow. So all sorts of things that people in the community can borrow through their library. So it's really not a big stretch today to say, hey, can we talk about from your budget funding one of these radio frequency detection meters? That way everybody in the community can borrow it and share it with their friends and their loved ones in other towns who may not have one for the week or 2 that you have it out on loan to you. So again, we're working towards solutions, and measuring this is critically important because today with 5G and the Internet of Things, and we'll tell you more about 5G in a minute. I just read an article recently that said they are predicting that all of our homes will have 200 plus devices connected to the internet in our homes, our appliances, the baby monitors, the gaming devices, the home security system, all of the appliances you buy. So we need to learn about this, and we need to learn about it faster. We're going to get very overpowered with microwave radiation. So measuring is critical, because everything you're buying these days that's electronic is probably going to start showing up with these radiating devices that you may or may not be able to control. So our local cable stations are one of the last bastions of independent reporting, and we'll talk about the media in a few slides later too. But my WACA TV was gracious to come to my house. We did a walkthrough of where common exposures are. You can look at that and say, gee, I really hadn't thought about, other than the microwave oven, that decked cordless phone or the laptop or the printer or the mice or the keyboard, what's happening with those. And then of late, WCCA TV in Worcester, Massachusetts has offered me my own program. So twice a month, we bring experts in, we bring citizens in to tell their story about how they learned about this, how they got sick, how they're remediating and trying to work around it. So real life solutions. So you're welcome to watch. I think we're up to episode 17 now. And it's just another nice way to stay current and to learn about this issue. Okay, so what does the science tell us? First, we're going to look at the long-term effects, child and adult cancers, DNA damage. So our own government, through the U.S. National Toxicology Program, which is the gold standard on toxics research in the world, they did the largest study they've ever done on this topic. They started about 20 years ago, and they went in expecting to prove that cell phones were safe, because that was the technology of the day. Instead, after an unprecedented 3-day peer review of the science, they determined clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage and other harms. Clear evidence is the highest of 5 categories they could assign. So that should have triggered public policy to protect us. The industry will get a hold of these studies and say, oh, that's just one study. You need to have more than one to corroborate the evidence. Well, right on the heels of the United States study, the Ramazzini Institute in Italy completed another multi-million-dollar study on cell towers. So now we have a cell tower study, and we have the other end with a cell phone. Both of them found these cancers, DNA damage, and more. So we don't need more science. We need an informed public and public policy to protect us. It was the infertility studies that got me on my feet. I read that they have taken male human sperm, exposed it to a laptop with the antennas radiating, and it changed the DNA, which is our roadmap to grow a proper anything from a human to a plant to a pollinator to a tree to any biome that's living, because we all operate of electrical circuitries, and this radiation is overpowering us. So for the male sperm, it changed the DNA, slowed the motility, caused far fewer sperm to be viable, or what's called apoptosis or programmed cell death, in just 4 hours of exposure to this laptop. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I had just sent my oldest daughter off to college with her MacBook, which of course she was using right on top of her reproductive organs. Our youngest daughter had just gone into high school, and for Christmas, we gave her a laptop and thought that would help her to have a leg up going into high school. And then come to find out there are now additional studies that talk about higher miscarriage rates and more on women's fertility. So that was the day that I found the courage, as Deb said, to come out of my comfort zone, way out of my comfort zone, and start asking questions about this and bringing this information forward to my schools and to my town. So this neurotoxicity is one that I think is impacting such a huge segment of the population. ADD, ADHD, autism, Alzheimer's. Dr. Hugh Taylor runs the OBGYN program at Yale Medical School. He has done some of the rodent studies, and he has shown that when we radiate pregnant mice with this man-made electromagnetic radiation, those pups come out and they start bouncing off the walls of the cage, much like a child with attention deficit or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. He has a wonderful program called the Baby Safe program or project that you can access. Dr. Martha Herbert founded the Autism Lab at Massachusetts General Hospital, and she sees huge connections between the families in her care and what we know the science is telling us. Alzheimer's now coming on earlier and earlier. It used to be just like cancers, they would show up after decades. With Alzheimer's, it used to be people in their 70s or 80s, and now it's commonly people in their 60s, their 50s, their 40s, their 30s, and even in some rare cases, young adults in their 20s are being diagnosed with autism. So how long can we continue to pulsate our brains with microwave radiation and expect that we're not going to see any harm? For a long time, the industry said, well, you know, there's no mechanism of harm identified in the scientific literature, so let's just keep doing what we're doing. Well, now we know about the cancer. Now we know about the DNA damage. And with neurotoxicity, one of the things that the science documents is that we have something called the blood-brain barrier. It's this membrane that protects our brain from toxins when they're being escorted out through the bloodstream. What the science is showing is that by jackhammering our brains with microwaves all the time, it's permeating or opening up that blood-brain barrier. So now these toxins can turn into the brain and start wreaking havoc. So we're going to talk about what happens in the media with this in a minute, but we're so grateful when more mainstream groups come into the fold on this and start giving resources and getting funding to hire people to work on this issue. And that's what's happened at the Environmental Working Group. So I first learned about EWG because they put out 2 fact sheets every year called the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen regarding the pesticides and the chemicals in our food sources. So as a mom, I tuned into that a long time ago. And they talk about what foods you should really try and buy organically grown if you can. And then they test other ones that are grown commercially that may be protected from the actual part that we eat by their outer shells and stuff. So I highly respect the Environmental Working Group, and now they are putting out fact sheets on microwave radiation. So this one, for example, says protecting kids from wireless radiation in schools and at home, acknowledging that the science is saying we're allowing hundreds of times more radiation than what we should be doing. And then here's one that they did on the central nervous system or all the neurotoxicity. We have to acknowledge that children are especially vulnerable. They are not just little people, little adults. They are biologically not yet fully formed. Their skulls are thinner than yours and mine. Their immune system is immature. Their central nervous system is immature, and this radiation is doing damage. So with great thanks to Dr. Om Gandhi and his colleagues, they've done the modeling on how much radiation penetrates when we hold a cell phone up to our ear. So these 3 head models are turned sideways. The yellow dot is the ear. So when you put a cell phone on an adult, that microwave radiation is pulsating into our brains about 1/3 of the way through. On a 10-year-old child, it's permeating that child's brain, thinner skull, higher water content, microwave, oscillates much greater in a higher water content. And then on a 5-year-old child, this is permeating almost their entire brain. So we have got to step up and start protecting ourselves and our children. Now, when we talk about the short-term effects, it's important to recognize that the Americans with Disabilities Act has long since recognized electromagnetic sensitivities for almost 20 years now. And they have recommendations out on their website for how to reduce the exposure and grant accommodations in the workforce for people who can't be radiated because it makes them sick. The good news is with a little bit of education, we have people come back and say, oh my gosh, Cece, I didn't want to know this. I don't want to believe it. But when you started spelling out the symptoms of microwave sickness or electrosensitivity, I recognized it. And so I thought, why not? Why not just create a sleep sanctuary and see if finally I might start feeling better? So time and again, people come back and report that the insomnia has now gone by the wayside when they cleaned up their sleeping area. And now we know scientifically why that can be. When we are constantly bombarding our brains with microwave radiation, the pineal gland in the brain, which is meant to release melatonin during the wee hours of darkness, it thinks the lights are on. So the pineal gland is waiting for darkness. We've introduced this invisible man-made light energy form, and it's pulsating all the time. So guess what? Melatonin doesn't get excreted from the pineal gland properly, which is supposed to regulate our sleep and help to do the day-to-day cell repair and cleanup and escort toxins out through the bloodstream. So if we leave all this radiation pulsating 24/7, it's a great explainer for why people aren't sleeping well anymore. Stabbing, searing headaches, migraines that your doctors can't figure out, nosebleeds, ear bleeds, chronic fatigue. And what we know scientifically is that our biological cells only have so much energy. That energy is pretty well calibrated to get us through a normal day and then do cell repair and regeneration at night. When we bombard ourselves with this environmental exposure of microwave radiation, our cells are going, oh boy, we got to take care of that. Uh-oh, we don't have enough energy left to do what we're supposed to be doing when we're not fighting off all this microwave energy. So it's no wonder that so many people are just tapped out these days. Pain from unidentified sources, skin abnormalities, rashes, heating, flushing, tingling, nerve damage. Turns out we have little antennas in the surface of our skin that can become very sensitized to this constant pulsation of microwave radiation. Heartbeats that go too fast or too slow. Cognitive impairment, as we discussed. You know, we go into the hospital and we get EEGs done. We get EKGs done. These are to monitor the electrical signaling of our brain and our heart. When we immerse ourselves in electropollution, that interferes with our own biological signaling. So it's no wonder that some people's hearts start going too fast or too slow. Anger and behavior issues. The science is also showing us that by radiating our brains, we are changing the gray matter and the white matter of our brains in the areas that control behavior and anger and functional executive functioning, where we make smart decisions. If we start damaging that part of the brain, well, we can well expect a lot more of this: anger, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. And at the medical conference, the doctors were telling us that if we don't get ahead of this, we can very well expect to see an increase in these societal outbursts like we've seen with the mass shootings. And when we sent the kids back into the classroom after the pandemic, we got on 3 different schools here in Boston alone. They were in the news because the children were getting so angry, they were wailing on their classmates and their teachers with their Chromebooks that were issued to them to go home and learn from during the pandemic with not one shred of safety information. So it's happening. And we were at epidemic levels of anxiety and depression before the pandemic. And how long have we been radiating our brains and the brains of our children? So unfortunately, it's not just you and I, as I mentioned, it's every biological cell on the planet. And when we talk about our species disappearances, it's not just the neonicotinoids. It's all of these environmental exposures, and the wireless radiation one is a big one. If you click through on the planetary impact link here, you will find highly credible, published, peer-reviewed studies showing the decimation that it's happening on our environment. And then there's energy consumption. Back in 2012, a Greenpeace analyst indicated if the wireless or if the cloud, where we're all putting all of our data and all that, if that were a country, the cloud would be the fifth largest consumer of energy in the world. And that was based on the energy consumption from 2012. And look what we've done in the last decade. So this is a very serious issue for anybody looking at climate change. And then you can see the damage from down in the Congo, the human rights atrocities to get all the minerals that need to go into all these devices. We would never just upgrade to the latest and greatest because the industry is telling us to and pushing us in that direction. We would use our devices till the last breath that they've got in them if we really understood what goes into getting these devices. All the data warehouses, the networks, and all of our own stuff are constantly using energy to send signal back and forth to do streaming. That consumes huge amount of energy. Download stuff to your device, then put it in airplane mode. Once it's on your device, you can enjoy it and you're not continually consuming energy. Every time we send and receive, every time we charge and recharge all this wireless stuff, we are consuming energy. And in the background, all these apps we've been sweet talked into getting, a lot of them we don't actually use very often. Get rid of them because they are in the background consuming energy to do these continuous updates. So this was a big piece of the puzzle that really had me puzzled. If this is as bad as the scientific literature is clearly showing us, why don't we know? So I'm back there scratching my head in 2013, 2014, and then in 2015, Harvard Law School Center for Ethics came out with this amazing free online report called Captured Agency, How the Federal Communications Commission is Dominated by the Industries it Presumably Regulates. And look at the graphic they chose for the cover of their report. It's a revolving door. And that's what we find has happened with many of our state agencies, many of our federal agencies, all the way up to the World Health Organization. So we have the industry calling the shots, putting laws into place to protect their profits, and then nobody's left protecting public health. So that was in 2015. In November, ProPublica came out with another article called How the FCC Shields Cell Phone Companies from Safety Concerns. So there's a lot of information once we even know to look. Now, remember that $30 million study that our National Toxicology Program did? That was commissioned 20 years ago by the Food and Drug Administration. Back then, many of our government agencies actually had qualified experts who could look at the science, who could make recommendations. But today, those people are long gone, retired, or passed away. And today, the gentleman who's in charge of the Food and Drug Administration's radiation area is a gentleman called Dr. Jeffrey Shuren. Well, Dr. Jeffrey Shuren, when you look into his background, he should have been nowhere near that NTP study because he went over to the FCC and said, oh, well, we don't really believe that study, so keep doing what you're doing with your public radiation limits. One might ask what would possess Dr. Shuren to do that after we had an unprecedented 3-day peer review with world-leading experts. You look into his background and guess who he's married to? A partner in a law firm that represents the wireless industry. So this is the state of our affairs today, and it goes all the way up to the World Health Organization. If you do a quick search, you'll come up with the first pages saying, oh, well, it's inconclusive. Let's just keep doing what we're doing. How would you know that they have actually reopened their investigation because these animal studies have concluded clear evidence of cancers. How would you even know? Because their website doesn't allow you to get to that information easily. Through this link, though, you can see that now that the animal studies have been done and found cancer and DNA damage, they have reopened their investigation to look at infertility, to look at the impact on the environment, on the elderly, on children, on pregnant women, on people with electromagnetic illnesses. But you'll be hard-pressed to find it on your own. And come to find out, up at the World Health Organization, there are two groups that work on electromagnetic radiation. One was the actual scientists who are qualified with the credentials to do this investigation. The other is heavily industry funded, and they don't have the qualifications. But unfortunately, it looks like the WHO, being another captured organization, appointed people from industry to do this most recent investigation. So the reports are starting to come out. I think just this week, the one on infertility came out. And you look at it and well, we'll wait till the real experts weigh in, but it looks like they disregarded a bunch of the good science and they only cherry picked the ones that would back up the need to not actually have to do something about this right now. So let's not wait for higher authorities to tell us what to do. Let's learn for ourselves how we can control the devices that we have control over. So let's start with our own stuff. Let's look at cell phones and laptops. The first step is you want to hardwire your technology. It's not rocket science to do. All you need to do is go to your router, look at it, and you'll find Ethernet ports. And when I finally discovered this, I realized, hey, I've got a whole box of Ethernet cables sitting in a box in my basement. I started dragging those back out. So just get an Ethernet cable, plug it in to your router, and then run it to where you use your technology. Now, today, most households have more than one device. So you can get that something that's like an extension box. It's called an Ethernet switch. And you just plug the connection from the router right into the Ethernet switch. And then that brings the connection in from the street. And then you just get your own individual cables for each one of your devices. And who knew, for like 20 or 30 bucks, you can buy these little adapters. You just make sure you look up one that's compatible with your device. And then you just plug it in, right? And once you plug it in, the way the engineering's done today, it doesn't automatically disable the antennas. So you manually have to go into your settings and turn off all the antennas, the cellular and data, the Wi-Fi, the Bluetooth, the locator, the hotspot, the 5G, and any other antennas you might find in there. And then not only will you be safer, but you will have a far, far faster connection. It's far more reliable. Your data is far better protected. Your privacy is protected because it's not being thrown out through the air where the data quality degrades. And somebody with $100 app sitting out on the curb could hack in and take your data as it's flying through the air. Wireless is not secure technology. Hardwired cables offer far superiority. So the first step is just get your wires in order, plug them in, turn off the antennas is the second step. And then it's critically important to measure because, as I said, the industry is pushing 5G and the Internet of Things. And everything they sell you, they want to put an antenna in to harvest your data, sell that as a revenue stream, and then somebody will know what your usage patterns are, which some people will say is a great infringement on one's privacy. So there's a lot of reasons why wireless is a bad idea. But you have to measure because, for example, my printer turned out it had 3 antennas in it. And I wouldn't have known that because the little glow plate on the front with the Wi-Fi logo was off, but I was still feeling not well sitting in my office one day. And sure enough, I turned on my meter and I spun around and it was the printer. I had to go into the settings and there were 2 other antennas in there that weren't connected to the glow plate on the front. I just went off, waited for it to dissipate, measured again, and I once again had a nice, safe living environment. So for the router, Once I hardwired everything and I turned off the antennas in my devices, I went and checked in with Verizon. That was my initial carrier. And I contacted their customer support and I said, okay, so we're choosing to hardwire our house for safety and for better connectivity. How do I stop that router from radiating in my basement? And they said, oh, that's easy. Sit down at your computer. And I went, really? And they said, yeah. And they walked me in how to get to my account online. And then they showed me the wireless settings. And so I clicked on that and it showed me we had a 2.4 gigahertz antenna and a 5 gigahertz antenna. All I had to do was go off, apply. And it gave me a message like, you know, you're cutting everybody's Wi-Fi off. And I'm like, yes, thank you. And then I waited a couple minutes for it to dissipate. And I went down, you know, you always have to check. And I measured and it was literally radio silence. So I felt pretty good because I had created a safe living environment for myself and my family and all my house plants. So you have to hardwire, turn off the antennas, and then measure. So that's the good news because this is all under your control. But there are a couple other sources of radiation that you may or may not have control over. So when I was a little girl, I'm one of 10 kids. And when we played hide and seek, it could be a while before you got found. So I'd be sitting there hiding out in the bushes and I just sit there and watch the dials go around on the utility meters, you know, electric, water, gas. Some people have propane and solar. All of them come with a meter that measures your usage. And so what the industry's been doing is coming to our towns and saying, hey, we can save you guys some money. You know how you pay these walkers to go through your neighborhoods to get the readings, to do the billings? Well, if you use digital smart meters, you don't have to pay those walkers anymore. We can gather that data for you wirelessly and then send it in for the billing. And if, you know, anything should break down in the system, we can send out an alert or something. So that sounds so great, doesn't it? Until we peel it back and say, well, common sense, knowing what we would know, would tell us to hardwire those too. Just hardwire the meters to the home and don't include a transmitter for radio frequency radiation. That's the end game. But that's not what they've done. These meters pulse microwave radiation continuously. The companies will say, oh, it's only a few seconds a day. I measured when I was preparing to testify before the Massachusetts Public Utilities Commission. And I sat down in my dining room. We have 2 meters on the other side, one for regular electric usage and one for our solar system. And I sat there with my meter and I did the math and I calculated out 17,000 times a day, this meter pulsed microwave radiation, 17,000 times a day. For what? A once a month reading to do our billing and they leave it pulsating the entire time? So if you have somebody near where these things are on the other side of the wall, it can cause great damage. At the medical conference, they were telling us that when these smart meters go on, they see an increase in patients presenting with microwave sicknesses. So we do not want these anywhere near where people are spending their time, much less in a multi-unit dwelling like a condo or an apartment building, where they just install an entire bank of them. And then the people nearby are just getting walloped with microwaves. And remember, we talked about how radio frequency likes metal. It's conductive. So if it's not installed properly, these microwaves can hop on the house wiring and pipes and travel all along and basically turn your whole home or office or school into a big microwave radiating antenna. And there are far too many reports of fires, explosions, improper grounding when these aren't done properly with the installation. So lots of reasons. And then we talked about the data harvesting and privacy issues, and that this is a sudden onset cause of microwave sickness. It's also a huge environmental justice issue. Here in Worcester, Massachusetts, for example, National Grid came in and said, hey, we're going to put in the smart grid and it's going to be just so wonderful. Well, not only did they put these toxic meters on people's homes that were making them sick, but they go into these environmental justice communities where people are working 2 or 3 jobs just to keep a roof over the head and food on the table. They may not have time to tune into anything going on in their communities. They may be minority, underprivileged, economically depressed areas that these predatory industries come in and target, knowing that people are unlikely to know what's going on and speak up. So Worcester, they put this toxic system in for their smart grid, and they went way over budget, which caused our Attorney General's office to get involved from the economic standpoint, because then they were going to turn around and slap the ratepayers with the overages that they came up against to put this system in. They were going to make us pay for it as the consumers. So the Attorney General's office got involved from the economic standpoint, and we have been educating them on the biological risks too. But then what did National Grid do? They turned around and said, hey, we did this in Massachusetts. Look, Rhode Island, look, New York, look, Connecticut. It's time to do this in your state too. So it's just unconscionable what they are doing with these utility smart meters and the smart grid. But again, we need to bring the evidence and the information forward to teach our towns, to teach our states that this is not the way to go. We should be hardwiring utility meters to the premises and removing any radio frequency transmitters from these devices. Jeremy Johnson was a Silicon Valley engineer, married to a medical doctor, and they were 2 of the unfortunate people who fell victim to a bank of smart meters on their condo. They got really sick really suddenly, and nothing in the medical doctor's training could teach them what was happening, why their health was crashing. But they ultimately traced it back to when these smart meters went on. And so Jeremy has done a TEDx talk, and it's a good one. You know, it's a hard conversation to have with engineers because they've only been taught you have to have heat to have harm. And that's not what the science today is showing us. So if you're trying to talk to an engineer or a physicist, this is a really good one to show them. And then Dr. Alexia McKnight is ironically a radiologist. She's a large animal veterinarian radiologist. So she's been highly trained on radiation, but they never trained her on the non-thermal, low-level microwave radiation that comes from all of today's wireless. Well, unfortunately, Dr. McKnight got so sick from a smart meter on her home that she said she would be out in traffic and could not remember if a green light meant stop or go. And this is a doctor. So she's done a TEDx talk as well. The other area that we have some control over, but our towns don't know it, is the placement of cell towers. There is a lot of science that's been done on this from the epidemiological standpoint. That means what is happening out in the world actually. And those are the studies that show that there's a death curve and a neurotoxicity curve that starts coming down around 500 meters, which is 1,640 feet. It starts coming down at that 500 meter mark. It doesn't actually catch up to the general population statistics for death and neurotoxicity until almost double that. So 1,000 meters or 3,000 plus feet. But the industry has started putting these cell towers right inside neighborhoods. They've been putting these massive macro antennas right on buildings or up on the rooftops and maybe hiding them behind a pretty facade. But these are very powerful radiation emitting transmitters coming in at close range. And you can go in the US to antennasearch.com and put in any address, and it will give you a return of a 3-mile radius and tell you how many antennas and how many cell towers are near you. In my neighborhood here, there's somewhere around like 30 or 40 in the vicinity. When I put in the State House address in downtown Boston, it came back with 1,100 or 1,520 cell towers, 4,512 antennas, these big macro antennas. so densified in the city of Boston. This is what one neighborhood in Hyde Park looks like. And we wonder why people don't feel well today. So this understanding EMFs is my personal research repository. I got in way over my head and I couldn't remember where important findings were. So being a tech writer, I started building a very simple research repository, no bells or whistles, just something you can skim very quickly to get to the facts and then drill down into the actual science. So all of my pages from Understanding EMFs are at Massachusetts for Safe Technology on our resources page. So I welcome anybody to use this, if it's helpful, as a launch point into your own investigation. So the big macro cell antennas and towers are encroaching closer and closer. Now we have to add on this new layer of electropollution that's called 5G. 5G simply means fifth generation technology, and it came after, first, second, third, and fourth generation. And it seems like, oh, okay, so it's just the next thing, right? Not a big deal. Well, it is a big deal because 5G can't fly by itself. The industry is spinning it up that, hey, you're going to get really fast entertainment downloads. We can have smart cities and super highways. Sounds so cool. But let's peel this back. When you look, you see that these big conglomerations that own the wireless industry are now preparing their next revenue stream, and they are buying the entertainment industry as they're pushing all this streaming, which consumes huge amounts of energy. It's very toxic unless you're doing it through Ethernet cables and adapters. So 5G can't fly on its own. All that's left to monetize on something called the electromagnetic spectrum that outlines how fast these waves are coming at us. That's the frequency and how long the wavelengths are. Right now, the reason why your 3G and 4G equipment can get a cell equipment connection indoors is because it's using these long wavelengths that are able to penetrate through objects like your house or your school or your workplace. Those long wavelengths allow it to come to your device inside. With 5G, these are teeny tiny millimeter waves. That's all that's left to monetize for a new revenue stream. So they're spinning it up that, oh, this is going to be great. We can carry vast quantities of data with this new 5G technology. But those little millimeter waves get dysregulated or disrupted by any objects in the way, whether it be rain or snow, your signal is going to start to degrade. Whether it be leaves on trees, we actually have had reports of these companies coming in the dead of night and lopping off the trees so their 5G small cell antennas can get their signals through. And at the very same time, our big cities are now planting trees to create an arbor effect to cool the cities so the sun isn't beating down on them so viciously in the summer months. So we've got a big conflict of interest going on there too. So 5G today won't fly unto itself. Technology will advance and they will bring these small cells with all this technology in these canisters. It's already happening, or hanging on telephone lines right inside our neighborhood. Their goal is to put millions of these cell towers at the curb, literally at bedroom height, right outside our homes, every 2 to 12 houses. This is what Boston already looks like. These are just the small cells. Add that on top of the ones from the previous slide, and we have serious electropollution in our big cities, and it's coming to our smaller towns too. So the kicker is Senator Richard Blumenthal, who's up in Washington, D.C. representing Connecticut. He was at a congressional hearing with the Commerce Committee, and he said to these two industry lobbyists, so please tell us, how much money have you invested to do independent scientific study of 5G before bringing it to market? And these guys kind of hemmed and hawed, and at the end, they had to admit, We don't know of any money that we've invested. And so Senator Blumenthal, in this little 4-minute clip, thanks to our friends at Environmental Health Trust, he says, so basically, as far as health and safety are concerned here, we're flying blind. And yes, that's the power of industry. Computer World and others are reporting 5G is a bad joke. They keep talking about all these faster downloads. Well, we already had that with 4G. We don't need 5G. But there goes Verizon last year, boasting at the beginning of the year, oh, we're bringing 5G to 100 million unwitting citizens. And then I just want to give a quick mention of this highly peer-reviewed paper that came out during the pandemic. It's not insinuating that 5G was causing COVID, but what it is reminding us is that our biological cells only have so much energy. In the areas where there's a lot of electropollution, including 5G small cell antennas mounted right outside, like they did in Wuhan. Wuhan was a smart city. We know biologically that that is going to weaken our biological cells just from the radiation alone. And then when you add a destructive virus on top of that, what have our cells got left to fight with? So it's no wonder that when we had electropollution growing rapidly, and then we had a virus on top of it, this paper documents that in those heavy electrosmog environments, there were more coronavirus deaths and cases. So that's a good paper to share. But don't go walking around saying 5G caused COVID, because that's going to discredit any kind of credibility you might have had up to that point. But do show them the science if they're interested in learning. So Dr. Magda Havis was one of the co-chairs of the EMF Medical Conference. She is a professor emeritus, which means she retired with honors from Trent University, where she taught electromagnetic radiation effects for 25 years up there. She recognizes that very few of our governments are tracking this cumulative exposure from all the emitters that are out there, the cell towers, the small cells, the smart meters, now the satellites, and everything that you and I have bought into with our own devices. So she is inviting the public to serve as citizen scientists, and you can go out to globalemf.net, and you'll see this map that as we take these readings in our towns using a scientific protocol that she's laid out with this Safe and Sound Pro 2 meter, then you can start gathering data in your town that you can then use to talk to your own town about. And then you can put it in her database so we can see where the blackout areas are over 100,000 microwatts. Red is dangerous enough between 10,000 and 100,000. Amber is getting up into the danger zone of 1 to 10,000, 1,000 to 10,000. The scientists got together in Salzburg a number of years ago and determined that provided you're not spending time right under a transmitting antenna, that we could probably do okay if the outdoor environment was 1,000 or less microwatts per square meter. And that's presuming that you get to go home and have a clean environment where at night while you sleep, your body can help to do that cell repair and regeneration. So this is our goal, to be at 1,000 or less. So I just want to say, anybody who wants to be a citizen scientist, just reach out to them. They're very busy. They're working on all sorts of different projects right now, but be patient. If you don't hear right back, just give them a gentle reminder. But if you haven't yet purchased the meter, and for this study, you need the Safe and Sound Pro 2, Rob Metzinger, who owns Safe Living Technologies that makes that meter, he's offering a discount. So if you reach out to globalemf.net and request the discount and say, I on my honor, I will participate in the study, then I think instead of paying $400, I think I paid like $308 a couple of years ago to get that meter. So again, our goal outdoors is 1,000 or less. I think it was Lori Schreier who went and measured her fire station. It was in the green. In Keene, New Hampshire, they had been in the yellow, but now they're starting to install these small cells right at the curb, right inside the neighborhoods in Keene. Nashua was already in the red, so was Concord. Stratham was in the blackout. And here in the North End in Boston, see this seemingly pretty wrought iron lamppost? That's actually a small cell that they put these pretty ones down this main strip of Hanover Street, where all the tourists go and a lot of the locals go for the amazing Italian eateries and bakeries. But look at, people live up above the storefronts, and they're putting these cell towers right in front of people's homes. So that's all the bad news. I'm going to spend a few minutes going over the inspirations that Dr. Martin Luther King gave us and what's actually happening in our society today. So Martin Luther King Jr. told us that when important changes happen in society, it doesn't just happen overnight, and it doesn't happen automatically. It's when the public becomes informed and gets engaged. And that's what we're hoping to prepare you for and inspire you with the many tools we're going to share with you momentarily. So the public has got to do their part to push it up from the bottom, up through state or local and state and up to the federal level. Eventually, the courts begin to rule, and we're going to share some exciting news on that front. And then in the end, public policy catches up to, in this case, the science, and actually begins to protect the public. So we're pleased to report that there are so many wonderful people, coast to coast, country to country, working on this all over the world. Let's look first at the legal solutions. And I won't go through everything, but I just want to give you the impression that there's a lot going on behind the scenes that we don't hear about in mainstream media, because mainstream media is owned by the very industries that are perpetuating this harm. But it's all here. So I mentioned that NTP study that found clear evidence of cancers and DNA damage and more. That should have triggered public policy, but instead Dr. Shuren wrote a letter to the FCC and said no need to do anything differently. Once the FCC took that letter, they put it into something called the Federal Register that made it formal that they've decided they're not going to improve the public radiation exposure limits. Once that got filed in the Federal Register, then the lawsuits started happening, because there were already 11,000 pages of evidence filed into a public docket with the FCC showing all the harm. So the lawsuits began. Environmental Health Trust, Children's Health Defense, and a bunch of other individuals and groups across the country. These lawsuits got combined into the DC Circuit Court of Appeals in Washington. And these judges were presented with the evidence that's in the public record, 11,000 pages and 27 big binders. And they're looking at all this science and medical evidence and all these citizens who are showing evidence of harm. And the judges are saying to the FCC attorneys, well, tell us, how did you determine it's okay to continue with the exposure limits as they are today? And the FCC just went, well, the FDA said it's okay. So of course the judges asked, well, where's the FDA's homework? And there is none. Not one of our federal agencies has done the official review of the science. They've just been passing the buck, putting up industry influenced notifications on their websites to make us all think this is all just well and fine, and it's not. So the FCC was sued and they won this lawsuit. Now we understand through the courts that the courts don't like to tell our federal agencies what they have to do. So what they did is they remanded it or sent it back to the FCC and said, look, you have to account for the biological harm to children, to the elderly, to reproduction, to electromagnetic illnesses, and to what this is doing to our natural environment. Well, it's now been 2 years and the FCC has failed to respond to that court order. So Environmental Health Trust and Children's Health Defense have put in additional filings, and we're still waiting for higher authorities to fix this for us. But it's not going to happen until you and I build that education at the bottom and push it all the way back up to the federal levels. That's what needs to happen to help push this along. So there are all sorts of lawsuits happening right now. The regulators determined that there was money earmarked to do this right, to bring fiber optics right to the premises where we just hook up with cables indoors. The industry took that money and started building out the wireless infrastructure because it's cheaper, faster to install, and it's highly profitable. They did a lawsuit that seems to free up our states to go back after that money and get it back from industry to do the right thing and to build out the hardwired infrastructure. Additional lawsuits, our friends at Americans for Responsible Technology have a petition that you can sign that calls upon the FDA to invoke measures to protect the public now. Here in Massachusetts, our state level Board of Health Association already has 4 pages in their legal guidelines on how boards of health should be aware of what's happening in our communities. They've got 4 pages in here already about cell towers, and I understand they're looking to expand it for the other exposures as well. In Pittsfield, Massachusetts, where they got a Safe and Sound Pro 2 meter into their public library because Verizon put a cell tower on top of the neighborhood that made 17 children and adults so sick they've had to abandon their homes. Finally, a Board of Health investigated, and they documented the science, the medical diagnoses of electromagnetic illnesses. They document the engineers, and they document that this expert, Dr. Eric Swanson, that the industry brings in, comes in and says, oh, it's all fine, it's all within FCC guidelines. Well, who cares? Those don't protect us anyway. But they went one step further and looked into Dr. Eric Swanson's background and found he has no credibility on this issue. He's a physicist, which sounds really impressive, but he's never published one single paper on the biological effects of man-made electromagnetic radiation. His specialty is in quarks and other properties of physics, nothing to do with radio frequency and health. So the industry parades these so-called experts around. They look shiny and bright on the outside, but when you look, there's nothing there. So for the first time in the United States, Pittsfield's Board of Health documented all of this. So this is an excellent document to show to your town and say, look, there's something significant here. And then because the town, the mayor and the city council, they told their Board of Health to investigate. They looked up to the state level authorities, costed out what it would cost to take this to court if it comes to that, because they issued this emergency order to Verizon and said, look, within the next 7 days, come to the table, let's talk about this and figure out how we can get these people back into their homes. A landowner in Pittsfield had already said, look, we're in a commercial district. We don't care if you move your cell tower over here. It won't impact any residential areas. So there are solutions on the table. Verizon would not come to the table. They went to the courts with their deep pockets and heavy influence and said, well, we don't think it's within the law for the Board of Health to do that. So we want an injunction against that Board of Health. Well, because their mayor and city council would not finance their Board of Health to take this to court, under duress, the Board of Health was made to rescind their emergency order. So now the citizens are suing the entire town. And they are so grateful that Children's Health Defense has lawyered up for them. And they put their preliminary paperwork in with the court. And the judge has looked at both sides and said, yes, we will allow this to go to trial. So we hope that'll happen through the end of this year. But one of another amazing groundbreaking things that has happened is that the Massachusetts Association of Health Boards has sent in an amicus brief. And that's a document that says, yes, we support the Board of Health and we support those citizens. So powerful things are happening behind the scenes as we speak. So you are welcome to go look at all these lawsuits to your heart's content. And as we mentioned, as much as we've been working on this issue for 10 years in Massachusetts, for whatever reason, we have never passed a law to do the right thing. But bless New Hampshire and Representative Patrick Abrami and Senator Tom Sherman for co-sponsoring this bill. We met with Rep. Abrami. He actually drove down to my home in New Hampshire, or in Massachusetts from New Hampshire, with Deb, who's our co-host today. We sat around my kitchen table and shared the facts with him. And he wrote this powerful bill that had pointed questions that needed answers. Why have Lloyd's of London, Swiss Re, and AM Best long since recognized microwave radiation, man-made electromagnetic fields of radio frequency, are a leading risk, and they put exclusions in their policies? They know they won't cover for damages. So that can leave our towns and our schools holding the bag for damages if they're not covered in their insurance policies. He asked, why does the legal fine print even exist? Why is the FCC ignoring thousands of peer-reviewed studies? And why do they only talk about these thermal or heat effects when the science is showing great harm at the non-thermal, non-ionizing level of exposure? And why does our country allow 100 times more radiation to the public than certain other countries do? And why is nobody looking at the cumulative effect? What happens when you put a child in a classroom with 30 tablets radiating, or laptops, plus the wireless access points mounted all over the building, which, by the way, the industry wants to sell as much product as they can, so they put them everywhere around the school, in the school, on the school, with cell towers. Turns out, through an expert in Ireland who came in on this in the early years of wireless installations, he used to do those. He knows you don't need these in every classroom. You probably only need 4 to service the entire building. And here we are with these extreme levels of radiating our children and our teachers. So the good news is, within a year, mind you, we've had bills for 10 years in Massachusetts. In New Hampshire, in 7 months, we brought in the experts. We all testified, citizens testified, and it got through the House Committee on Science, Tech, and Energy. It then went to the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services. It passed both of those, and then it went under Governor Sununu's pen, and he signed it into law. By law, they had to form a commission and investigate. And they did. And they came out with this groundbreaking report. They appointed top-level experts. Dr. Kent Chamberlain, who was the chair at the University of New Hampshire of the Computer and Electrical Engineering Department, he thought this was going to be a slam dunk. He's been working in medical devices for his 30-year career and thought, of course, it's got to be safe. He got in and looked at the science and did a complete turnaround. And now he is out there educating others on how harmful this is and working with the engineering community to teach how to have much safer technology without the radiation risks. We had 2 medical doctors on there. We had Dr. Paul Haru, who's one of the world's leading scientists on microwave radiation. We had engineers, we had physicists, and we had the Attorney General's office, representatives from the business community, and 2 seats were reserved for the state level industry association and the national level, the CTIA, the wireless industry, so that we could get it all out on the table at once. So within this report, you will find the science, you will find the federal agencies dodging the questions, you will find a minority report, 10 pages in there, which is kind of a gift. It's the industry playbook. It's all the stuff they give to our towns and our legislators to make us think that this is all fine and you have no choice and we have to put these cell towers in, which is not true. Congress empowered our towns to put zoning bylaws in place that would allow us to say where these things can go. They never should ever be allowed in residential areas. So we have been empowered by Congress, but how would our towns know that when the industry has only told them this packet of disinformation? So this commission report, next to the Pittsfield Board of Health document, these are our 2 most powerful documents in our country today. Dr. Kent Chamberlain gives a 20-minute presentation on this report, and he shares his slides. We all say, don't take our word on any of this. Look for yourself and decide what you want to do. So from that report, the next step was to come up with bills that would create laws to enact the 15 recommendations in that commission report. So we did that. We tried to get setbacks based on science. So you can't put any new antennas anywhere near where people are, but go with the science showing us a minimum of 500 meters. And Frank Clegg from Microsoft Canada, in his testimony, said wireless technology is no longer advanced technology. It has outlived its useful life as a main source of connectivity. We all deserve to have hardwired fiber optics or high-speed cable right to the premises, where we simply pick up with wires indoors, turn off the antennas in our devices, and we should all be entitled to safe technology and not have radiating smart meters on our homes. So we have been introducing bills in New Hampshire for a couple of years now, and every time the industry gets in and squishes them. But they say God doesn't close one door without opening a window, and right as the industry did this session, closed us down, a state rep from Maine who's a nurse, she reached out for help in writing a bill that would do what the commission bill in New Hampshire did. That bill has already unanimously passed the House through its second reading. In the Senate, it did not pass, but we're hoping that pressure from the House will have them reconsidering. We understand there may be some pretty serious conflicts of interest in the Senate, but we keep trying. So other states are working on this too. Here in Massachusetts, we have 6 bills this session, the top 4 of which have been around for many sessions, and we hope we're getting to the tipping point on all of these. We have 2 new bills introduced this session, one to improve our civil rights so that people who are being harmed by this radiation have the right to go out and access society and ask for accommodations to be able to get in to places without being radiated. And a colleague up in Canada recently said that some of the stores are now having like the first hour for people who are sensitive, whether it be sensory issues with autism or ADD or ADHD. They will turn off those overhead lights that are throwing off a lot of dirty electricity. Maybe we can get them to turn off the wireless signals so that people can access society, because more and more people are becoming shut-ins because it's too potent out there to just walk around on the streets. And then we need a place to file when people say, I am sick. They can tell their board of health, they can tell their medical team, and their medical teams and boards of health can then put it into the state registry of harm, where they're already collecting data like on Parkinson's or COVID or food poisoning. We already have the database. It's high time we introduce electromagnetic sensitivities and get it tracked and reported on, because with better data, we can make better public health decisions. So lots of bills all over the state, and you can go in and look at all of these online. And the industry routinely comes into our towns and puts in their applications to put these close range toxic antennas up. And then townspeople will find out and say, no, 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 we don't want to do that. And the industry will tell your town, oh, those are just the NIMBYs, just the not in my backyard people. Nobody else cares about this issue, which is simply another point of disinformation from the industry. Our friends at Americans for Responsible Technology have 150 plus groups all over the country on their website who are very actively, in most cases, some people get fatigued and life happens and they have to tend to other things. But there are dozens upon dozens of groups all over the country working on this. And here in Massachusetts, you can drill through here and see that towns are successfully updating their zoning code to make it difficult for industry to just roll into town and throw up these toxic antennas at close range. And there are many towns. The city of Boston has filed with the FCC saying, we believe the public. City of Boston sued along with mayors from towns all over the country. They didn't win, but all these lawsuits build off of each other. In Burlington, for the first time, they adopted a small cell policy here in Massachusetts that said, you can't just come in with these antennas and drop and run. You have to come back every year and recertify that they are still compliant with the FCC guidelines. And we as a town don't have that kind of money to do those recertifications, so you're going to have to do it and bring in an independent expert to do that recertification. So the night Burlington ratified their small cell policy, the Verizon attorney was there and he said, well, my client doesn't want to set a precedent for an annual recert or a fee, because mind you, they plan to put millions of these in all over the country, and that would seriously cut into their bottom line. So they withdrew their 7 small cell antenna applications. So something can be done, but our towns simply don't know it, and that's where you and I can help our communities. So our friends at Americans for Responsible Technology came up with a checklist that you can take to your town. How does your zoning code stack up? Came up with a sample zoning code of the minimum of things that you should be including in there, and then show you real examples from real towns where they've taken the advice, hired a good attorney. You know, we have great town attorneys, but most of them are way out of their depth when it comes to telecom code. So hire a good attorney who's experienced, and other towns are following suit and doing it. So it can be done, but nobody's going to do it just because you raised your hand and said, I think we have a problem here. You need to own it and get others around you informed in your community, so a bunch of you can carry the burden of seeing this through to the end. But you can go through this, that towns all over the world are working on this. Again, we don't hear it in mainstream media, so we keep going along thinking it's okay. But all this is happening behind the scenes. And as we've just sent our children back to school, guys, we have got to do better. Dr. Holly Grow got a team of medical doctors with all different specialties to go to the legislature and start addressing this. They passed a law unanimously through the House and the Senate to start addressing this and come up with best practices for digital devices. The crux of this is we are way out of balance right now. The industry has shoved this all Wi-Fi all the time in. This is how kids have to learn today. Well, this is not how children learn best. And our medical community knows this. Children need to be working one-on-one with trusted adults, working with their peers, face-to-face, not with a screen in between them. They need to have meaningful human contact. They need to have physical touch. They need to have movement, and they need to be out in nature, all of which is inhibited through digital technology. So they just got this passed. The law put them together with their state agency on health, their state agency on education and technology, and they have come up with best practices for digital devices. So this is bringing the balance back. The Netherlands and Finland are recognizing that children do not learn best from technology. It's a huge distraction in the classroom, so they're taking it out this year. New York Times did a 3-part expose showing what Silicon Valley execs are doing with their children. They're taking it out. No technology, no wireless, no hardwired. They know children do not learn best from a screen, and they've taken it so far as to have their nannies sign contracts that there will be no screens around their children. So our friends, Patty and Doug Wood, who have Americans for Responsible Technology and the Baby Safe Project, they've now launched Tech Safe Schools. Any of us can go to their website, let them know what town you're from. They will send a packet of information teaching your schools the health risks, the legal exposure that they've unwittingly taken on in our schools, and most importantly, how to remediate. They will send these really good, credible packets to your school so that you can then educate not only your schools, but start getting all the parents around you educated, and we'll give you some good resources for that too. But the Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition has already developed kindergarten through 12 curriculum, and Dr. Alexia McKnight, the one who is the radiologist who got so sick from the smart meter, she and I were brought in to do professional development with her schools. So there's a 45-minute video here that you can share with your schools, and we provide our slides. So as ever, people can dive into the science for themselves. And here again, Once our schools learn about this, we have the online training built to quickly train everybody. It offers a handy tip sheet at the end you can print out, and it offers a certificate of compliance for your human resource department so they can check off that everybody took the training on this important content. So our friends at Environmental Health Trust have all sorts of fact sheets you can print out. Maryland is the first state to recommend hardwiring and moving away from wireless in the schools, and they have just issued a fact sheet on this. And then the U.S. Collaborative for High Performance Schools recognizes that man-made energies can be very harmful, and they have a low EMF best practices guidance there that we can be sharing with our schools, and we can see what other countries are already doing. So lots of resources. The first medical school textbook has come out that you can share with your doctors. Over at Physicians for Safe Technology, they have all sorts of highly credible information put out there by MDs and PhDs. Here's that new textbook. And we have all these incredible resources for people in these other professions as well. So some of us aren't too intimidated by playing with the wires again. For others, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be able to figure this out. Well, you can hire an electrician to come in and do it. You can hire a building biologist. These are highly trained consultants, many of whom are certified in electromagnetic radiation specialties. Others also have mold, water quality, air quality. They can come in and assess your entire indoor environment. And I brought in a building biologist. I think I paid, I don't know, maybe around $800 to do the full assessment, to look at the VOCs and the formaldehyde and all of it to make sure that our indoor environment can be as safe as it can be. Now, one of the hardest lessons I learned is don't go it alone. Get those around you educated as citizens, and this film Generation Zapped is a great way to do that. Bert Wolf on PBS has 2 half-hour episodes. You can do those. Our friends at Americans for Responsible Technology have an entire toolkit for you to contact your neighbors, to write to the local letter to the editor, to reach out to your town, to reach out to your legislators. We're taking all these best practices and laying them at your feet to make it easy for you to get busy on this. So we have to remember our kids are big fans of monkey see, monkey do. Whatever they see us doing, well, we've just given them permission to do. So we need to set boundaries for ourselves and for our children. And there's 50 ways to take a break. You can click on here and see it. It's a great reminder of all these amazing things we can do to positively fill up our lives and look after our neighbors and our communities without being on a screen all the time. So the earth prescription, there's another scientific property called Schumann's resonance. It was Schumann who figured out how many times per second the earth pulses natural healing electromagnetic fields of natural radiation. 7.83 times per second. We all are supposed to be connected to the earth to get that energy to regulate our own electrical circuitries. But now we wear rubber-soled shoes, we drive on cars with rubber sneakers on them, we live off the ground, and all of that breaks our connection to that healing energy. So there's a great body of science on earthing or grounding. You can look that up. And then Dr. Laura Conover has done this book called The Earth Prescription, and I love it because she takes it very practically, because we can't all walk around on the grass. I'm in the Northeast. I can't do that 6 months a year. So how can I naturally ground? And she walks us through, like, touch the pine needles, touch the leaves, the high water content of a plant will automatically ground you because that plant is grounded to this healing energy. Or if you are walking your pet out on the lawn, touch their less furry areas, their snout and their ears, and you are instantly grounded through your pet. So lots of common sense things once we get the information. So I love the earth prescription too. So here's what you can do with your town. The goal is to get to as low as reasonably achievable with any kind of radiation. And our Centers for Disease Control already acknowledges that this man-made and natural radiation high above the earth with, the gamma rays and stuff. You don't want to get yourself messed up with that. So they recommend 3 things with radiation. Spend as little amount of time as you can radiating yourself. That's why we wear the lead aprons and stuff when we get an x-ray. Create as much distance from a radiating device, although with the low level non-ionizing radiation, distance is still important, but we have to understand that the nature of this spike pulsation of radiation can still get at us from a cell tower across town. And if you can't get away from it, you should really look into professionally shielding it. And I say professionally because there's a lot of pitfalls with grounding the wires and stuff and doing shielding properly, but the solutions are there. And then our towns need to investigate. We have great resources for our municipalities. And again, we always have to measure for biological effects, not those bogus things put out by the FCC because they don't protect us. So next steps, we can't kid ourselves. There's no safe level of man-made radiation. The goal is to get to as low as we can. And even Dr. Linda Birnbaum, who used to head up the National Institutes of Environmental Health Medicines, and she oversaw the National Toxicology Program. She said, indeed, we do have captured federal agencies, but there are still some good public servants up there. But the pressure needs to come from us, pushing it up through local, state, and up to the federal authorities. So let's educate the public, send everybody to our free public education webinars. These are always posted on our events page at Massachusetts for Safe Technology. We do education forums for individual towns, so bring us in for that. And please, let's get our schools educated on this. And start where you are. What do you do for a living? How can you help those around you learn? What professional associations do you belong to? They're always looking for public speakers, so bring me in. Happy to educate, use the tools that we have, and let's just start moving towards safe technology and remind our towns, if they are not experts in telecom law, hire somebody like Andrew Campanelli, who is. So for today, how might you think about reducing your exposures? First step is to just take stock. What is radiating around you? Start with baby steps. Create a sleep sanctuary first off, because if you don't protect your sleep, you might get into a domino effect where the cumulative effect hits that tipping point, and then all sorts of wacky things start happening like they did to Deb. And then start getting the Ethernet cables and hardwiring your house 24/7, turning off the antennas, putting everything in airplane mode, and using these incredible resources that are already available to us. So thank you for joining us. You can find New Hampshire for Safe Technology on Facebook page. This is what their page looks like. And they also have an email address here that you can just reach out. Let us know how we can help. Same for Massachusetts for Safe Technology. This is our website that has incredible resources for you to tap around into. And then you can reach me at ma4safetech@gmail.com. So I'll stop the share. And Deb is still with us, which is great because Comcast was in her neighborhood today and their service went down for a bit. So Deb, I'm so happy you're still here. Did we have any questions in the chat that we?
I do have some questions, but I did get booted out in the middle of this. So at
welcome
the time,
back.
when I came back in, all the chat disappeared that I had. So I will tell you the recent conversation that I have seen with questions regarding meters.
Okay.
About information on getting the meter and as well as the discount from Dr. Havas.
Okay.
And then questions about, do you need both a 5G meter? What about the Safe and Sound Pro 2? And then another question was, is the 5G end more dangerous? Or so I don't know if you want to handle that, but
sure, I'll take a stab at that. So yes, 5G is more dangerous because it's adding an additional level of electro pollution in, and it's using a new form of technology, which is these millimeter waves. So you're still going to have the big antennas trying to find you and get to your device. And then they're going to take this beam formed energy literally like a radiation laser to your device using the millimeter waves. So in order for that beam to get to your device, it's probably going to go right through you too, which is a very dangerous proposition. So yes, 5G is more dangerous, one for the technology and two for the proximity, because in order for 5G to fly, they have to put these antennas in at close range. So some are calling it fixed wireless, where they're putting boxes on the building. Other 5G antennas are showing up on poles, they're showing up on wires, they're showing up under manhole covers. So yeah, 5G is especially dangerous. And then Deb, I think they were asking whether the Safe and Sound Pro 2 captures 5G. Well, 5G really is just a marketing term. Every company is doing it differently and slapping the name 5G on it. Knowing that it includes 3G and 4G signals, yes, it will capture a lot of what companies are calling 5G. It captures, if we want to get just a little technical, the Safe and Sound Pro 2 captures 200 megahertz up through 8 gigahertz. And then there's a whole nother segment of the spectrum that's being used privately by governments and isn't really available for commercial use, military, etc. And then up on the higher end, the other meters that have now just come to market go from like 20 gigahertz to 40 gigahertz, and that will include the millimeter waves. So if you go out to Safe Living Technologies, you will find that SLT has both of these meters that have come to market now. And they've got a couple of videos that they've been doing trainings and workshops on that you can watch and learn how to use these devices properly. Did that get it all there, Deb?
I think so.
Okay.
I also did say in the chat that we would be including all the links that you had from your slides anyways, where you did talk about that, and Dr. Havas.
Yes.
We had Vincent had 2 questions.
Mhm.
One of them was, are we familiar with the Hampton cell tower that Vertex is may have as an application for? And I had briefly heard something from Pat Abrami, had sent me an email that he had been to an event about that, but other than that, I don't know too much.
Yeah, and Vincent, I think folks in your group have been in touch, and we've been trying to prepare them to be giving public comment to your local municipalities and suggesting, and actually for anybody who's listening to this, once you have my slides, you can just go pull those resources out there, the Pittsfield Board of Health emergency order to Verizon, the lawsuit against the FCC that they lost, and the New Hampshire Commission report, which all these are very highly credible documents that the industry would rather your towns not know about. And you have the playbook from the industry in that, New Hampshire report, pages 18 to 27. This is the spin that the industry puts on it. But if you go to the back of that big 400-page document, the full report, you'll see that Senator Denise Ricciardi and Dr. Paul Heroux debunk a lot of stuff that's in that minority report. So we can help people through that. And yeah, so it has to be done town by town. There's no cavalry coming, but we can certainly help you with resources to allow you to become the expert for your town. And there was actually an article in the Epic Times this past week that they interviewed the citizens, Andrew and his wife from Ithaca, New York, where they have updated their zoning code for both the town and the city to not make it easy for industry to just roll in and put this willy-nilly wherever they want, where it's easiest for them because they don't have to run electrical, they don't have to take down any trees or create roads. They're going to go take the path of least resistance and put it in an appropriate place where it's harmful to your environment and your citizens. So Andrew Molinar said, it's up to us as citizens to become the experts to guide our municipalities on this. And they started from scratch. They didn't know anything. And yet here they are 2 years later, and they have strong zoning code to protect themselves. Unless these new federal bills undo everything. So
Vincent had one more question.
yes.
I know you touched upon this. Is it a coincidence that COVID came out at the same time as the rollout of 5G?
We did touch upon that. If we look at the facts, we know that where you have a lot of radiation, the body can have a very hard time keeping up with the additional burden of a virus. We also know that on Halloween, October 31st of 2019, Wuhan, China became a smart city. They turned on about 10,000 of these close range microwave transmitters. And within 2 weeks, that virus was out there and people were literally dropping in the street. So just look at the facts and do your very best to remove as much radiation exposure as you can.
One other question, Cece, do you have one of those new 5G meters in addition to the Safe and Sound Pro 2?
I don't own one, but I love that question. So a gentleman in Australia has developed a 5G meter as well, and he offered to send me one to play with, and so I did. And while I had it in my possession, I reached out to a couple of gentlemen who are becoming building biologists, and I knew they had just completed their training. And so I said, hey, I have a 5G meter with me. Would you like to take a look at it? So I drove out and I met Alistair Mraz, and I let him borrow it for a couple of days. And he, when he brought it back, let me know that he had bought the one from Safe Living Technologies. He said, I'm going to be offline for a couple of weeks, so if you want to borrow it, go ahead. So I had both of these 5G meters, and I knew there was a small cell up at the top of, like a half mile from my house on the border of our town in Framingham. They stuck it right inside this neighborhood. So I went over there with the meter and I thought, let me see if I can catch anything. But what I quickly realized is that you need to have a device to communicate with it. And I use an old iPhone 7, so I don't have a 5G phone. And if I had a 5G phone, it would have to be from the same carrier as the one who put their antennas up in that 5G canister. So it's a little nuanced. You have to have the carrier's device in order to measure the connection. So I thought, well, let me see, maybe, I was interviewed on Boston 25 News when Verizon came in and put 5G small cells up at Fenway Park for the Boston Red Sox stadium. So I thought, let me go down there and see if maybe I can pick something up. So I parked illegally and I was right there by the stadium, and I got out with this meter, and it was actually picking up radio frequency without me having a 5G phone. And it's either because that transmitter was not only using beamforming technology, but maybe that was pulsating all the time. I wasn't there during a game. There were a few tourists milling around and a few of the workers getting ready for the nighttime game, but it was picking up 12,500 on that millimeter wave. And again, out in the community, they want us to be at 1,000 or less scientifically. So I haven't gotten extensive experience with that, and I had to return the meters. But it's exciting that these guys have worked so hard and cleared all the hurdles to bring these new meters to market, because it was not an easy challenge to do. But we think they've done a good job. And if you go out to Safe Living Technologies, you can watch the actual building biologists telling you what they're finding and showing you their readings. So that's out there now too.
All right, Cece. Chris has another question. Sorry
Okay.
if this is confusing. Why would you need a receiving unit to measure 5G RF?
Because we have to remember that all wireless technology is two-way microwave radiation. And theoretically, so the 3G and the 4G signals are always going. They're always coming off of the cell tower or the routers. The router you can control, the cell tower not so much. They're always pulsating. You have a device, and with the addition of the 5 millimeter frequencies, those are supposed to only transmit when your device is there and accepting a signal. That's what they've told us. I think when we look at the stuff from the building biologists, they may be discovering that they have not held up their end of the deal, and they are actually letting those beam-formed frequencies pulsate, whether somebody's requesting a handshake or not.
Oh, yeah,
Cindy
sorry,
did
if I,
ask, yes, that it
Go
was.
ahead, Chris.
Yeah,
yeah, just to be clear for my own understanding, and I'm totally clueless about this stuff, but if obviously your phone sends to them and they send to your phone, but are you, I mean, so you're I think you're saying unless you have a phone, you wouldn't be getting any 5G radiation.
You probably wouldn't, theoretically, you wouldn't be getting the millimeter waves, but remember, 5G is a composite of many different frequencies, including 3G and 4G. So those are always going to be pulsating. So
I
if you
see.
wind up with a cell tower out in front of your house, in front of your bedroom,
Mhm.
that's going to be pulsating 24/7. That's what 5G
Yeah.
is.
Okay, so then a cell tap. So you were basically when you were in at Fenway, or when you were at that in Framingham,
Mhm.
that was a cell tower, right? So why couldn't you measure that? I mean, even if you weren't actually connecting with them, other people would have been, right?
Right. So I didn't have their device, and so I couldn't pick up those higher frequencies. And now theoretically, they're only supposed to beacon those higher frequencies when your device is calling for a connection.
But if other people's phones around are requesting that,
And I think that's why I wasn't able to pick it up in Framingham, because there was nobody else around me. But when I was in Boston, I was able to pick it up. It could have been somebody walking past me who had 5G antennas on, or it could be that the vendor is actually not doing the eco mode, but are actually pulsating all the time. I don't know enough yet about that. But again, if you go out to Safe Living Technologies, these guys are investigating it right now, and you'll get some really good answers. But thank you for all the good questions and for wanting to learn, because, I'll give you an example. When you talk about, if I just turn off my phone, am I okay? I have a friend who's, well, she wound up with the glioblastoma brain tumor. She's a realtor, and so she used the phone up to her head an awful lot. She would come to meetings with us. I'm in a women's group with her. And she kept getting called out of the meeting because her teenage son had such deep anxiety. He couldn't bear for her to be away. And so the poor thing, she's trying to give herself some time with friends and colleagues, and she couldn't even get away for a meeting. And she said, I lived in a condo, and when I turned on my cell phone, I could see Wi-Fi connections from like 40 different units around me. So just because you don't have yours, this stuff goes through floors, walls, ceilings. Cell towers travel for miles. So she wound up being able to get into a single family home. She has recovered from her brain tumor. Her son, who's now 15, has now had a clean environment for several months now. And he just announced to her, he said, Mom, I'm done with this anxiety thing. And he's feeling like himself again. So it's critically important that we protect ourselves as we can. And then the areas where we can't, we have got to speak up. And don't go it alone. Get your loved ones, get your neighbors, find the senior citizens, because they recognize the big tobacco playbook when they see it. Get everybody around you educated, because one voice is easily swept under the rug by very busy public servants, right? So use Generation Zapped, use the PBS episodes, and get this conversation seriously started. Chris, can I ask where you're from?
I live in Northampton.
Okay, is that New Hampshire or Mass?
No, in Mass, yeah.
Okay, because
we talked by email once.
Yeah, so some people bring me in and I can facilitate the discussion. You can show this at your library, bring me in, we can do a whole forum around it. We just did a couple in Upton when they were trying to put forward zoning bylaws to protect their town. we're here to help. You don't have to know everything, but at least with my slides, you'll know where to point for credible information, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's great what you're doing. And I'm still gonna have to get better about understanding what I'm actually measuring with the meter or not measuring. So,
Yeah.
you know, because I think that really, when people see that, because you can't see the waves, so you think, what's the problem? And so if you can show the meter, then
See-
it's real. It's real. Yeah.
Sydney has something to add to this conversation. Go ahead, Sydney.
Oh, well, yes. And thank you, Cece and Chris. I'm so interested in your questions because as having a Safe and Sound Pro and doing a lot of meter readings at different antennas, and also reading a lot of spec sheets from the antennas, you know, the macro towers where they have 12 antennas or 16 antennas and they're collating with more antennas. And then if you read the spec sheets, each antenna, 6-foot antenna, is emitting multiple frequencies. Some of them are in the high megahertz, like 900, and some of them are going into the low gigahertz, like 2 or 3 gigahertz. And then when you're looking at the antenna array, there are some very small antennas, and those could be the millimeter wave antennas. But so the 5G is confusing because it's not just the higher, like you were saying, the higher millimeter waves. It's the whole ball of wax. It's the high megahertz. It's the low gigahertz, and the high megahertz go far. They can go miles and miles. You know, we have our antennas. The closest big cell towers are miles away from me. My cell phone works fine when I do use it. But anyway, I just want to explain. So using the new millimeter wave, I was thinking of investing in the new millimeter wave meter, but not yet, because it's really, we don't have any small cells near us, and I'm just so interested right now in those high megahertz and the low gigahertz, because that's really what moves farthest and what people are getting very strong reaction to. And also the smart meters are transmitting not in the gigahertz range. They're only transmitting in the high megahertz range. You know, and megahertz it goes up to 1,000, and anything from 1,000 megahertz is then called the gigahertz. Yeah. So the Safe and Sound Pro is perfect for most of your needs, for almost everything. And you know, it's like if you have multiple allergies to something and you're allergic to gazillion things, it's so important to know a lot of what you're allergic to. And then a few other things like the millimeter waves, that's so new that right now, if you know what you're exposed to, under 10 gigahertz, that's huge. That's huge. That's everything right now. The millimeter waves, they don't even penetrate through houses. I mean, you've got to be, the cars actually are the ones that are really using the millimeter waves. And so that's why I'm really excited to get that meter at some point, because I have an old car. Make sure I have older cars, because the higher millimeter waves are being used in vehicles. And some people are really reacting badly in the car, outside the car. So I'll stop talking, but I just wanted to add.
That's great, Sydney, though. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah. Just quick, millimeter. So millimeter are above 10 gigahertz then?
I believe so. Cece, what do you think?
That's a good one to ask of Safe Living Technologies. I'm not an engineer, so let's let them weigh in. But that new meter that they put out goes from 20 to 40 gigahertz on the millimeter waves.
Oh, so there's a gap between the other one, which
There
goes
is, because the gap in the middle is not deployed commercially. It's what our militaries and others are using.
Okay.
But wouldn't it be interesting to know what those readings are from the military and from, you know, whatever? I mean, I'm curious about that, but right now the Safe and Sound Pro millimeter wave doesn't measure that missing area, which someday we will find out. But right now the Safe and Sound Pro is the best. It's the gold standard at this point, right? For us.
I'd agree.
We have a new question from Vincent. Cece, you mentioned you got rid of EMFs in your car. How did you do that?
I bought an old car. I have a 2002 Lexus from a single owner that had low miles when I got it. But some can be disabled. I know someone who had a pickup truck and they just went into the fuse box and were able to identify where the antennas were and just unplug that. So it really comes down to the individual manufacturer, make and model.
Vincent, I have a 2009 and my husband has a 2014. And we have no RF in either vehicle because both of our vehicles, we can turn all that off, Bluetooth and everything. We don't have any of that Apple CarPlay or any of that stuff in our cars. So again, you have to look at the year and who the maker is in the
Yeah,
model.
and have a meter. That's really the only way you're gonna do it.
Okay, so those meters, the Pro 2 will basically measure those car signals other than millimeter stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions today? All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for coming and for coming
Oh.
back.
Hold on, one more question.
Okay.
What about remote locks? Isn't that EMF also?
Remote locks. So when I first figured this out, I was checking out everything I owned. I had a little Yahtzee game in the bathroom. I was seeing if that was radiating me. And I was checking the locks on my car. I was checking the remote control on my garage. Those only send signal when you press that button, right? So you get to make the choice. Am I just going to put my key in the door and turn it and completely remove the exposure? Or am I going to press it for 1 second and hope my body can clean that up if I got exposed to something? So we're all very individual, but I actually ditched the remote control on our smart TV. We did get one finally, a smart TV finally that had an Ethernet jack in the back. And then I could go into the settings and turn off all of the radio frequency antenna. But, you know, technology progresses. So they gave us this remote control that allowed you to talk and tell the TV what you wanted it to do. And that was using a wireless signal. So I got rid of that and got the old one back. So it's individual choices.
On that note, we have Comcast,
Mhm.
and Comcast does allow you to put in codes because they give you the option of RF mode or infrared mode. So I use those codes. So ours is infrared mode. We cannot do talk to text because I disabled that.
Mhm.
You can just look it up on Comcast, what these codes are on their XR remote, I think it is, and they actually tell you that. So there you go.
Yeah, there's a lot of sleuthing involved in this work.
Yes.
Can I ask one more question and I'll be shut
Sure.
up after that?
No, Chris, you
Yeah.
don't have to shut up. We're here to help.
It's very interesting for sure. The smart meters, you said they're 17,000 times a day they're shooting out.
That's what
That's
mine
like
are doing.
That's like every 5 seconds or something like that, right?
Mhm.
So would you basically keep the detector on for, if you keep it on for a minute, you should get a few beeps from it? or
Yeah,
something?
that's what I did. I've actually got, are you on my mailing list?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So look at the thing that I sent out today, and I
Okay.
included that little video because we're gearing up for a smart meter hearing. It's just a
Okay.
3-minute video, and you'll see that, yeah, in like a half a minute, it went 5 or 6 times, and then I did the math from there. Sydney.
Just one more thing also with the smart meters. The one we don't have one in our house because we opted out, but our neighbors got one, and I've done multiple smart meter readings with the Safe and Sound Pro, and some of them are collectors. Depends upon where in the neighborhood the smart meter is. Some of them collect more and then they pulse much stronger, and some of them maybe 2 doors down, not so bad. It's interesting, and also there are some smaller bursts that I've noticed. Within maybe a minute and a half, I've got a couple of the smaller ones, and then a big one. Every minute and a half, a really big one. It's funny how you just have to get with the meter. You just think, oh my gosh, look what this one does. Oh,
Yeah, that's interesting,
so
Sydney.
all
I'm going to go do that. I'm going to see if things happen later.
Yeah,
Huh.
and then the nice thing about the Safe and Sound Pro is that you like you said, you can plug it in, and it never goes off. But you can't use that and put it onto a computer screen and see this.
Yeah, you
thing.
can't gather the data. There are
But,
more
yeah.
expensive meters that will document that.
But you can keep it on. It won't go off, and then you can go over and look at it because it'll hold the highest reading.
Yeah, the
It's got a
max.
peak and a max, and the
Mhm.
max is the one you want to see. Oh my goodness, that's the highest since I last checked a minute ago. Oh, that's much higher. So then
Right.
you reset it, and then you go back and go on with your day, but you can go back and check once in a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No, that would be really interesting because some people have insinuated that during the night there are surges that might happen too, as they do their data harvesting and updates and that sort of thing. So yeah, it'd be really interesting to see physically what's happening overnight.
Do the meters also have batteries so you can go anywhere you want with?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, keep a spare. They last a long time though, in my experience.
And you know what I love about the batteries is they're just double A's. It's not
Mhm.
the 9 volt where you have to pop those things out. You just put them right in, take them out, and it lasts a long time. And then it has the battery readout, so it tells you how bad, how low it's
Yeah.
getting. They last a long time, months if you're not using it
Yeah.
every day.
Okay.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you.
Oh,
Oh,
geez,
go ahead, Chris. I know you were going to be popping questions for the next 20
my
minutes.
wife's from Brazil, so we travel there a lot. And will these work? It's basically the same around the world? Doesn't matter.
That's an excellent question. My guess would be yes, because radiation is radiation.
That's what I think.
Um,
Yeah.
But I love that your wife's from Brazil. There is a group of experts in Brazil who have done educational forums on this.
Oh,
If you go, so I'm trying to think of how you can get there. So I have a YouTube channel, which, none of us ever imagined we'd be doing this work. So I started posting my EMF videos right to my YouTube channel.
uh-huh.
And so it's still under my name instead of Massachusetts for Safe Technology. But I was an invited guest to speak on state and local policy for the Brazilian conference that they had. And there's another guy touring the world right now. I think he got funding and he's out there interviewing experts now to do a new movie on this. And he's from Brazil, so we might have some really good content. And some of the best scientists are from Brazil. So it's a good country.
So what if I type in CCRF Brazil or something?
Go to Cecilia Doucette on YouTube.
Is that okay?
And my playlist, maybe.
Let's see. Oh, that's Ashlyn.
Hang on, let me.
Finding all these other site, not your spot. Not your, oh, here you go. Cecilia Doucette. Okay.
There we go. And then,
Video. Videos, okay. And what should I search for within yours?
yeah. I was seeing
Search.
if I had a separate playlist for that one, but it might just be under my wireless technology safety talks.
Okay.
Okay.
That's good. Yeah. Okay.
And if you can't find it, you know where to find me. Just pop me an email and I'll be sure
Yeah.
to get it for you.
Sounds good. Yeah. Thank you for patience.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming today. All right, everybody. If that's all, we'll wish you all a tech safe day and we'll catch you next time.
Okay.
Thank you, Cece.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Deb. Thank you,
very much.
Sydney. Thank you, Ava, Thais, Vincent. We appreciate you being with us today.